So, good afternoon, everybody. Once again, welcome to the Whisky Circus. We've got a nice picture of Boutique Dave on the Forerunner, drinking his, I'm presuming that's water, Dave, and smoking a cigar. Would like to welcome Iain from Glen Scotia, and we'll let him give a brief introduction to himself and what he does at Glen Scotia, and then we'll go straight into some questions. So, over to you, Iain.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Son, and thank you very much for having me.
No problem.
It's a pleasure to be here, and as I say, I hope everybody's safe and well. Obviously, after what you were telling me there, Son, you forget that obviously it's troubling times. So I hope everyone's good. Well, yeah, absolutely. My name's Iain McAlister. I'm the distillery manager. I started off as a distillery manager, now the distillery manager, master distiller at Glen Scotia. I've been there since 2008, 31st of March, 2008. And yeah, I mean, what a job, fantastic job. I'm from Campbeltown. I was born and bred in Campbeltown. So I joined Glen Scotia, I think, just at the right time. At that time, there was only 3 of us there, myself, a distiller and a mashman. The existing distillery manager was retiring, Mr. Hector Gatt. He was previously at Springbank, and he came over to Glen Scotia for a few years to obviously more on a caretaking basis. So yeah, it gave me a wonderful opportunity to obviously a few years there to learn my trade, if you like. And as I say, that continued right up until about 2013, when the Loch Lomond Group took over. And obviously, it's what you see now is a result of that inward investment. So it's been a fabulous journey. It's not if I started off at the distillery when it was running full flight. I seen it at its worst, if you like. So for me, it was a super job, super position, and a wonderful opportunity.
I mean, what gets me in is that obviously at one point Campbeltown was considered the capital of the whiskey industry in Scotland, really, and we've kind of plummeted from being such a vibrant area to 3 distilleries. Can you think of any particular reason for that, or is it just one of those things?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Campbeltown, it was unique in the respect. Obviously, you think of the distilleries in Campbeltown, everybody's heard a few of the names. You're obviously your Glen Scotias, your Springbanks, your Glengyles, and potentially some of the other ones. You could rhyme off Dylan Tober, Loch Ruin, etc. And obviously, there was an element of that all over Scotland. But nowhere quite like Campbeltown. I mean, even before 1817, when you get the first, if you like, in the modern wave of distilleries, there was still distilleries, illicit distilleries more so, about the area. But it was pretty much, I guess it coincided with obviously expansion of trade in Campbeltown of your Victorian industrialist, who'd made his money potentially from the herring fisheries. And again, from that international trade with Campbeltown strategically positioned for Europe, from the Americas, etc. So there was a lot going on at that time, and obviously that wealth, there was obviously wealth generated. Whiskey became the in thing. Everybody wanted, a share of the action. So you can see that obviously demonstrated from the early 19th century right on until really the 1920s, really, that was really the end, the collapse, if you like. But there was that capital available. It was never usually one man, it was usually a partnership, 2 or 3 individuals who would obviously go into partnership and start up a Glen Scotia or a Dylan Tober, whatever it was. And there was a number of reasons why it failed. Obviously, the original owners started to die out. It started to get taken over by more mainline Scottish-based, companies and owners. The trade links were easier from Speyside. Campbeltown fell out of favour slightly. It was easier to obviously work with the Speyside for blending. yeah, there was a lot of different reasons, you know, and it was really, it was unfortunate to a certain respect. There was potentially ways at the time it could have been managed better, but it was a dramatic fall from grace in certain respects. But the as I say, it's back. You know, obviously we're back. Springbank's obviously been carrying the banner for a number of years, so it's nice to see obviously Glen Scotia back in the foresight too, or the forefront, because it was always there. It'd been running, potentially not really been running, you know, or marketed the way it should be. So it's great to see.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one thing that does kind of surprise me with the Campbeltown area is you've got a lot of people that are massive fans of Campbeltown whiskey, as they call it. So we're obviously really talking Springbank and obviously yourselves at Glen Scotia.
Yep.
And yet people still, you know, they talk about Campbeltown, but they kind of don't really talk about Glen Scotia. And when you look at Glen Scotia, to me, it's a more approachable drink for the masses than, say, Springbank is.
You know, that's a really good question, and I can totally see how that is. Yeah. Well, if we talk about why, you know, obviously Springbank's been obviously on the ball for a number of years now. You know, 30, 40 years anyway. You know, they've had stable management. They've obviously done a fantastic job promoting their product, and they do make a fantastic product. And they've really held the banner for Campbeltown. So, you know, all credit to them for doing that. Glen Scotia, on the other hand, has never really had that stable management. It's had different owners. It's had poor owners at certain periods of time. You know, it really has. It's been mismanaged. It's been bought for all the wrong reasons. It's only now, in the last 7 years, son, that you really see it now stable and run as the way it should be. So absolutely, you know, if you don't know about Glen Scotia, that's understandable, and I can see why. When I started in 2008, there was houses across the road from Glen Scotia, for anyone that knows where Glen Scotia is. And it was an amazing amount of people that used to say to me, you know, I'd know them vaguely, you know, say hello to. It's amazing the amount of people that would say to me, is Glen Scotia working? Are you doing anything in there? Or, you know, so it's in a short space of time, it's really came together, you know, and it's really, give it another 7 years and see where it takes us, for sure. And absolutely, the styles are Campbeltown styles, but potentially Glen Scotia's, I think, slightly more accessible, you know, for maybe your average whiskey drinker. Not taking anything away from Springbank, because I say I love some Springbanks and I think they're fantastic whiskies. So, yeah.
No, I mean, that's kind of where I come from, because I mean, I'm not the biggest peated whiskey fan, and I do struggle sometimes to understand the love for Springbank. And I know when I was introduced to yours, and obviously the first thing, you know, it is slightly peated, but I don't really find the peat on most of it. And to me, your double cask, which is what I'm actually drinking now as well, it's one of the most approachable, valued whiskies that is on the market to me. It's perfect for almost everybody.
Well, yeah, it is. And, you know, and as I mentioned, you know, probably what's been a lot easier for me is when I started in 2008, obviously at that time period, to get to know the distillery, to potentially right a few wrongs, if you'd like, through the production process, the technical side. And obviously when I started, it's, you know, I needed guidance too. You don't walk into a distillery and you know it all. So I worked quite closely with John Peterson at Loch Lomond at that time, and John was pretty much a chemist, you know, a scientist really, you know. So he was quite big into fermentations and such like. So we did a lot of work on fermentations, mash sizes, you know, the whole went through everything, cut points. So potentially it gave me that opportunity, you know, if you like. obviously the picture's slightly bigger now. You've got Michael at Loch Lomond, the master blender, so you've got a lot of people involved now. But initially, through the distillation side, working at Glen Scotia, I basically had that opportunity, you know, to obviously look at what we're producing and potentially manipulate it, but whilst keeping that Campbeltown DNA in the distillery. So it was quite, I was quite lucky in that respect. Whereas, you know, obviously Springbank is, they're stable, as we mentioned, you know, they're producing a fantastic product. But potentially you've got to follow on from what's been done, where I was, again, you know, and as I say, it was a fantastic opportunity I had. I was allowed to obviously have a look at everything. So yeah, that obviously, you know, it did help for sure with the double casks and moving on from that. Yeah.
And I mean, you know, when we look at Glen Scotia, so you're not actually that far away from your 200th anniversary. 1832, you know, we're now in 2020, so you're only in theory 12 years off. I mean, are you already kind of looking at something for that milestone, or?
Well, to be quite honest, no, not that I'm aware of at the moment, but it's probably something that we will look at, you know, when we're probably not too much further down the line. To be honest with you, most of the time now is taken up with obviously keeping up with the festival bottlings, keeping up with the core range and etc. So it gets busier and busier and busier. Same with the distillery single casks.
Yeah.
I know you, as I say, you're not a peated fan, but some of the Glen Scotia peateds, I was the same. I was obsessed with first fill bourbon. Now I've got a slightly different regime going. And some of the Glen Scotia peateds I really, really quite like, you know, because of they're approachable. And that really helps.
No, that's it. I mean, I know it's one of those where kind of say, you know, I'm not the biggest peated fan. I think what I've learned to do is appreciate the peat. And that's a difference where, you know, it's not a case of I don't enjoy peat. I've started to appreciate, and my palate is now starting to understand the peat. So I kind of get into that side. And I have noticed that the majority of your festival bottlings do seem to be peated. So, you know, obviously we're going to put a petition in against that at some point. But I mean, what I kind of wanted to say as well is because you're not a big distillery in the sense of it that, is it 800,000 litres your capacity?
I would say probably if I was really pushing it, trying to keep to the same quality levels, I would say I would be lucky if I would get that. I would be very lucky, very lucky.
I suppose that will be, when I say capacity, obviously I'm thinking flat out, you know, top end sort of numbers. But I mean, can you sort of give us a quick rundown? Obviously, we don't expect a real detail, but you know, your fermentation times and your mash size and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, I'll go through the process in brief for you. I mean, I a lot of the guys might know this. I obviously have used the same malt supplier since I started in 2008. So all my malted barley comes from Glenesk Maltons in Montrose, and I particularly like the quality I get from Glenesk, whether that's non-peated or peated. And for the peated runs, I'll pretty much do a month out of every year, if you like. So, and in that month, I'll break it down into, there's 3 different variants: a lightly, a medium, or a heavily peated, and I'll do 2 of the 3 variants depending on what I'm looking to lay down. So when I started, it used to be a 28 ton a month, and now we're 28 ton a week. So that pretty much equates to, last year it was 517,000 litres of alcohol we produced. And everything about Glen Scotia, you know, it's really quite hands-on. The operator has got a big input in that quality. So that's why you need the right team there, and the team is fantastic. So through the process, as I say, we're pretty much grinding it in the grist, you know, down the grist. And the grist, again, you know, I keep a close eye on the grist, because the type of mash tun we've got, really old mash tun, potentially late Victorian, early Edwardian era. rack and pinion, and it's got a false bottom in it. So you've got to not too much flour, you know, just the right balance. And again, it's the type of equipment is very, very unforgiving. So we could learn it, so we could pick it up and we could learn it. But you know, even I'm talking about myself here. I know I can't get quite the same results that the guys get. Yet you try and do everything, replicate what they're doing, and it's all in the technique. It's all in how you open that valve, how you shut that valve, because you know that there's no buttons to press in that respect. So you've really got to make it your own. So it's quite challenging using that type of mash tun. There's not many about. And again, you know, obviously the wort's going to be slightly cloudy, which obviously again helps with that flavour profile. And right through to the wash bars, stainless steel. When I started, it was 6 Campbeltown steel wash bars. Now we've got 9. I've got to think. It's that long since I've been down there.
I will forgive you.
We've got 9 stainless steel wash bars. They're 25,000 litres, but I'm only putting 14,500 litres in, so it's quite a small batch size. Okay, and that again, you know, through the 75 kilos of yeast, a pressed distiller's yeast, which I used 2M, which is a normal reacting yeast, and 1MX, just to get that perfect balance, you know, on the flavour profile, slightly quicker at a set point there in the fermentation. But through that fermentation, you know, it's a batch process, so we're doing 10 mashes a week. We'll get 9 wash bars. So you're going to basically start off at a minimum of 70 hours. Then I'm going to move on right up to about 100 and touching 140 hours. So that's giving me an average of about 128.8 hours through that fermentation. And it's, yeah, it really, you know, it seems to really work. It seems to really, you know, the new make spirit is really flavoursome. It's even got that salinity at that stage. Obviously, the compounds, the longer the fermentation, then you're going to get a certain amount of these higher alcohols that will manifest themselves in a beautiful flavour profile. So there's a lot to be, you know, there's a lot to be gleaned from, you know, that stage alone. And fermentation, sometimes the stage it's probably most overlooked. So there was a lot of work in there, and it took a lot to obviously get it to that stage. I always maintain that if the new make spirit itself, you know, if you taste new make spirit and it's really quite accessible and palatable, and you can glean a lot from that, you know, whether it's a certain amount of fruit background to it, there's less fainty notes, then, you know, your fermentations are pretty, you're on the way to obviously producing good quality whiskey. So from there, obviously, through to distillation, classic double distillation. We've changed the small still, the spirit still there recently. It's just back in there last week. So charge sizes, again, you're keeping an eye on the charge sizes, because the stills themselves are quite small, but we're getting fantastic contact with the copper. And again, it's so hands-on, because the still man, he'll apply the heat. He'll obviously bring the still into the safe, and he's keeping an eye on the cut temperatures, the cut points and the temperature itself. And he's the man that's obviously running it, and they do fantastically well. You know, it's a skill. It really is a skill, because there never has been. There's no Glen Scotia operations manual. Do it the way it's, you know, the way we've got to do it to get that quality.
Are your stills direct fired?
No, it's indirect. So we're basically they were originally, to be fair. And if you look closely, if you ever visit Glen Scotia, you can see where they were. They used to obviously work with a chain grate, and you would have a stoker and a still man, and you would obviously feed the stills. And there was a flue which ran out to a chimney at the back. I've been the engineer who still works at Glen Scotia. He's off and on, you know, he comes back to help us. He can remember it vividly. So it's, yeah, they're direct fired. My goodness, it's I've got to say it's quite challenging, even with the as I say, the indirect. So the direct firing would be a challenge for sure. But interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And so obviously, like you say, you have a long fermentation, which, I mean, your fermentation is pretty long compared to a lot of them. So, and I think that does show on the spirit, because you do produce a very fruity style whiskey.
Yeah, it does. And it's obviously something, it's obviously going to be, when you look at the financials, it's obviously going to be expensive to produce, for sure, because you're leaving it lying there for longer. Plus the fact, it's not always a given that the longer you leave it, the more flavoursome it will become. It's obviously something you've got to understand and know what's happening, from your wort versus the quantity of yeast you're putting in there versus the type of wash back it's in. So there's a lot to consider there. And ideally, if you can obviously initially monitor it right through, and that's what I used to do. I've actually got a book where I was down pretty much some points 24/7. I was taking different gravities of the wash back, different samples, just trying to analyse it. So as I say, it really helps if you can, just know what you're about and know what the end goal is. So yeah, it's interesting. But as I say, you've really got to obviously hold on to that Campbeltown or that Glen Scotia DNA there. So,
yeah. I mean, what would you, if somebody said to you, what is the typical characteristics of a Campbeltown whiskey, then how would you describe that?
It's good. Obviously, you're going to get that maritime, that coastal influence. I mean, when I look at one, and I'll show you this obviously here, because I never tire of this. Okay, so first thing I do when I clean glass with Glen Scotia, and that's why I like this type of glass, is I'll always go like that. And then there you go.
Just watch it. Yeah.
Can you see that? I don't know if you can see that or not. You get the halo, lovely halo. It's always got that subtle oils. Okay, so as I say, you're getting these subtle oils, maritime, coastal influence, absolutely beautiful. Even at that strength, 52%, you will get the salinity. As I say, you can get the salinity in the new make spirit, and that's obviously a lot to do where the barley's come from, where it's grown, etc. So there's obviously a certain amount of absorption, the sodium aspect there. And you're going to get a flavour profile, obviously, from the fermentation. So all these components, the coastal, the subtle oils, the salinity, flavour profile, that pretty much sums it up. You're getting a Campbeltown. It's not an Islay, it's not a Speyside. It's got a certain amount of robustness there for sure. But it should be perfectly balanced, and that's the same with the peat. Obviously, Son, you mentioned the peat. The peat and the obviously the festival editions. All these different peating levels in there. It should work. It shouldn't just be dominated by the peat. You should get a lovely balance, really accessible, and potentially appeal to many.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a couple of questions coming in, and one's from Gary. Obviously, you'll know Gary quite well, and he wants to know when we're getting onto the tower, but we'll leave that for a few minutes. And another one from Jens is, so what are your cut points on the new make? And he's asking how it can be maritime if the peat is from Glenest and Aberdeenshire.
It's a good question. Obviously, the peat's only. Sorry, the peat. Does he mean the peat of the malted barley? Is that? Yeah.
So I'm obviously you get your malted barley from Glenest, I think you said. So I think what he's kind of asking is, where are you getting your maritime notes from? Which I'm assuming is going to come into your maturation points. But then obviously, what are the cut points on the new make?
Yeah, okay, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you about the cut points, and then we can talk about obviously the coastal influence. Well, what I normally do is I change it slightly with if I'm going on a peated run, which it can obviously be as I say 1 month of that year. What we normally do is, obviously, your top cut point's going to be indicative for the strength of the material you're working with. Okay, so it potentially could come in about 74, 73% ABV. You're obviously going to run that. We're going to run the 4 shots, a lot of volatiles in there, methanol, such like. So we want to obviously dispense with them. We're going to run that for about 15 minutes, or again, the stillman's using his judgment and his experience there. He's going to monitor that, and if he's not happy with it, then he'll run it a little bit longer. So we're going to run that, and then potentially we'll get to 71, sometimes 72 if it's slightly higher, and we'll run that down to 63. So that's going to be the heart of the run there, okay, is that area. And below 63, we'll run that as faints, so that'll go for recycling again, right down to 1% with the cut points.
So just jumping in there, what are you filling your casks at then?
All our casks at the moment are 63.5.
63, and obviously we know that'll be going into the finest oak available.
Yes. Well, I pretty much spent 9 years filling first fill bourbon casks from various different distilleries. Now there's a slightly different regime, which is obviously definitely the way forward. We've got first, we've got second, and we've got some medium char barrels. So that obviously helps with the diversity there through maturation, and again where these barrels are stored. So all these different aspects really make I've got a big bearing in the end product, if you like. Yeah. So
kind of combining another question in before you get onto the peat, which will run into the peat and the maritime flavours. What warehouses do you have, and is it a mixture of dunnage and rack, or other by sea?
Yeah, well, we again, there's a percentage I put off site for sure, for storage at Loch Lomond, and that's plainly to do with space and stock rotation, etc. There's a percentage that goes into a palletised section at Glen Scotia. Again, there's a percentage that goes into the racked warehouse. It's a modern 1970s asbestos building. And believe it or not, that's my favourite building. It's fantastic. Some of the whiskies out of there, and there is a small percent that goes into the dunnage warehouse. Yeah. More often than not, a lot of the ones that goes into dunnage will, remain there. Yeah. So there's different casks or different areas, and for me, the area, where it's stored, specifically in a building, it could be what you like. If you visualise a big barn, where that whiskey is stored in that area has got a huge bearing on it for me, because I notice so many differences, where I'm accessing whiskey, whether it's obviously from the higher reaches, right up the top of the stills, which, as I say, I really, really got a soft spot for, or whether it's, it's lower down. So there's a lot of different variations there. Maturation, yeah, absolutely. It's again, it's a bit like fermentation and distillation. It's really a skill, or it's a discipline in its own, if you like.
So going back to the maritime notes and that then, so how are you expecting they are getting into your whiskey then? Or is it just a kind of opinion that it's there and it carries on from that?
Well, funnily enough, it actually helps. Yeah, absolutely. And I can see your point of view there. Obviously the malted barley is coming from Persia, as does the peat. The peat's maybe slightly further north there. So it's all coming from that area. As I say, it actually helps. It actually enhances the process, because the quality of that malted barley, plus the fact, as I say, there is an element of sodium through it, really helps through the process. So we're getting that raw product, if you like, as we do with the yeast, and obviously we're working with local water. But the fact that we're obviously running that through the process of running that in Glen Scotia, we're putting our own stamp in that. So we're taking that raw product and we're making it, you know, we're giving it like these characteristics. And it's a fair point probably to say that even at the new make spirit, it has got that coastal influence. You know, it's got the oiliness, it's got that sodium, so it's really quite distinctive of Glen Scotia and of that Campbeltown element. So there's a lot you can do, and as I say, the fact that obviously the malted barley is not grown next to Glen Scotia per se, you know, it's obviously elsewhere. That doesn't really have a huge bearing in what we're going to get at the end of the day. Don't get me wrong, it's obviously something I would love to do as local barley, just for the sake of doing it. You know, obviously, yeah, absolutely, that would be grown here, and you know, I'm quite into all that. But for obviously getting that quality product, if we get that malted barley, it's good quality, and we treat it with respect, and obviously the guys, I say, work to high standards. If we can obviously run that through the distillery the way we should be, then we can certainly, we'll turn it into that coastal aspect.
So, I mean, in theory, reading sort of between the lines of what you're saying is, yes, you get the quality barley in, but it's what you do with that influences what you're getting off the still, what you get into the bottle at the end of it.
Absolutely. It's all, you know, and every distillery would be slightly different. You know, that you could get the same barley going to it could go into Orkney or somewhere like that, and it would obviously come out slightly different. You're obviously, you've got the raw materials. We're giving you the bricks, if you like. We're giving you the mortar. You build a house, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, this is one sort of aspect that I come from, that it kind of doesn't necessarily make a massive difference if your ingredients aren't totally local. It's what you do with that ingredient to make it your own, you know, put your own stamp on that to make it a Campbeltown whiskey, or a Speyside whiskey, or a Lowland, or an Islay.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you said to me, okay, so on you on Glen Scotia Distillery, you said to me, right, I'm wanting 517,000 litres, and I want you to use all the barley from Kintyre. I would struggle. I don't know how I would manage that, to be quite honest with you. Potentially the quality would drop. There's a lot of variables in there, you know, and there's something that I would need to obviously think about long and hard, because it's, as I say, that's the whole reason why I've stuck with the supplier I've got. Don't get me wrong, you know, I'm paying a premium for it, but the reason I pay that premium is because, you know, I like the end results. You know, I like what I'm getting at the end of it, and it's really, really is important that you know, I keep these standards up.
I mean, are you on Concerto?
Yes. Yeah.
So have you looked at any different types of barley strains, or are you basically happy with what you've got, so you're sticking with that?
Well, when I started, it was Optic. So Optic was the main one, and that was what I was using. Then I changed to Concerto. I'll try to think when I changed. A good 4 or 5 years ago anyway, changed to Concerto. And yeah, it's, you know, it's top notch what I'm getting, you know. So that's really important. It really
I mean, it's kind of the don't change something for the sake of it, you know. If it's not broken, don't fix it, sort of thing.
No, and that's it. And as I say, it's you know, for me, I would love to do local barley, and it's something I looked at 2-3 years ago. And it was actually a farmer I know quite well who does a lot of work in the distillery, and we talked about it, and we actually had the grain merchants and everybody, you know, we had a great meeting, and we decided we're going to do it. But the one thing that came out of that meeting was obviously the yield's going to drop and the quality would drop, you know, and that's just the way it is, you know, because obviously Kintyre's not as conducive for growing grains as, you know, the east coast of Scotland is. Not that I'm saying you don't get some, you know, wonderful whiskies here, but it's just over the, you know, the bigger picture, it would be harder for me. It could be interesting for sure, and as I say, you know, it is something I want to do, but it's going to be something that it needs a lot of careful thought, you know, in the future.
So what was the decision to change to Concerto? Was it just that you weren't quite happy with the liquid you was getting, or was there something else more into that?
No, it was more just a natural progression. You know, I was obviously just keen to, you know, stay up with the you know, the different varieties we're getting, and that variety, you know, after trying it, I thought, yeah, that's improved it. That said, sometimes when I do peated malt, sometimes it is a blend of the both of them. You know, sometimes it could be Optic and Concerto. So but for, you know, the non-peated, it's always the Concerto. So yeah, it was a certain, you know, improvement in the quality of the new make spirit.
Yeah, and I mean, I know talking to Michael over at Loch Lomond that they're obviously playing around with yeasts and things like that. Is that anything you've looked at there, or are you just going to stick with what you're using?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, that was something that went through a lot of, you know, well, quite a while ago now, but we did a lot of that. You know, I was every kind of yeast known to man at one stage. Dried, pressed, white, you know, there was a wide range of different yeasts, you know, and as I say, the experimenting with these yeasts, experimenting with the wash back charge sizes, the fermentation times, and even going to the extent where we would put them through the stills, we would run the new make off them, and then we would actually analyse them. So I would give them to the chemist, and we would try and get a breakdown of the potential higher alcohols we're getting, and what ratio, and when did they come out, you know, when were they available through the, you know, the run. So that's something that would, you know, that I did quite heavily in the early days. But now, obviously, I'm at the stage now where it's quite, it's a pot still. So you know, you're obviously, if you're producing a good quality product, then you want to keep just doing that and add your twist in as and when, you know, that may be, whether you're using different casks or, you know, different woods, or, you know, whatever whatever you want to do at that stage.
Yeah. So one question, which I know you've kind of answered already, was with the correlation between peated and unpeated. What percentages are you doing of the 3 different peating levels of your whiskey? So you're obviously doing a lightly peated, medium, and heavy, and then non-peated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, historically there was only medium and heavily peated. So in fact, when I started in March, one of the first runs that I was dealing with was the medium peated. So what I tend to do is lightly to 20 parts per million is a lightly peated, 20 to 30 is a medium peated, and 30 and above is a heavily peated. And I'll do right up to, at the moment, I've done 54.5 parts per million for a heavily peated. Don't be put off by that. It's
no.
It really is quite accessible. You know, it really is a lovely dram. It's not too overly peated, but it's got a lovely balance to it, especially with the first fill bourbon cask. And by chance, that's what I've got in well, I think I've still got it in the shop.
Yeah. I mean, I know you've kind of mentioned, obviously, first fill, second fill bourbons. So, 2-part question here. What casks are you using and have you used or intending to use in the future? And what casks do you find suits Glen Scotia the best?
It's a good question. I think you've always going to have that bourbon influence. You know, the bourbon influence is always got a big part to play in Glen Scotia. If you look at the 15-year-old, for example, you know, part of the core range, that is, you know, indicative the Campbeltown Glen Scotia style. So, you know, I'll use or have done, as I say, the bourbon influence really. If I get a bourbon, absolutely. I've actually, again, another one. It's not been released, but it's potentially available going forward. Is the use of a refill American oak. And that's, that's wonderful too. It has got a lot of the distillery character. So you're really looking at that American-esque type cask, and that really brings through the best of Glen Scotia. Not to say that obviously the finishes we've got, there is certain finishes in sherry and port, obviously with the festival, and wine, and they're really all interesting too. They really are. But I think really for that core style, whether it's starting off from the base, if you like, starting off from the beginning, then the bourbon influence is important.
I mean, I know two of my favourites in your range are the 15 and the 18, which are predominantly bourbon casks with a very short finishing sherry at the end. And I think I could be slightly wrong here. When I was talking to Ibn, you kind of don't really mention the finishes because you're trying to get away from the finishes. Is that right?
Well, I always, it is what it is, and your stock profile is what it is. So, it's while the 15's obviously, a combination of refill casks with a first fill finish and then a short. But the 15's are very short. It's only 4 to 6 weeks maximum, in that sherry cask, Oloroso sherry. So you're quite short in that. But no, again, it's that bourbon influence is imparting because obviously you're spending that long in the first fill bourbon. It's imparting all these characteristics, and the sherry is just giving it that round off there. It's obviously a certain amount of the sweetness and just bringing everything together. And it's the same with the 18-year-old. It's slightly longer for sure. Obviously you're 12 months there, but again, it's very floral. It's got that salinity in it, so it's all got these coastal aspects. So if it works, if it works, it works.
I mean, one interesting one, which this isn't really a question, but it's been a long-standing joke within the whiskey community that everyone uses the finest oak casks. I mean, who's using the pearl ones then?
No. Well, that's it. It's well, to be quite honest with you, I mean, the bourbon casks I was using, and I still will to a certain extent. It's slightly more stable now, but in the early days, I had a wide range of different oak, bourbon casks. I use the word bourbon, obviously. I got them from Jim Beam, there was Heaven Hills, Jack Daniels, Maker's Mark, Wild Turkey. So there's a lot of different casks in there. And again, that was really interesting because obviously you got to understand how these different casks, work with the new make spirit. And I think that's really important to obviously to at least try it. I'm not saying that you should do it at a huge scale, but at least try it and see how it works out. Because Maker's Mark, particularly, some of these casks were fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing because obviously me working for the English Whiskey Company, we only source from Jim Beam. So it's interesting to hear that you source from a few different ones. And are you noticing a massive difference in finished product from each of these casks, or are they quite similar?
Well, it's slightly more nowadays. You tend to base more Heaven Hills now. The early days, I had a wide range, so it's slightly more constrictive now. Obviously, as the core range is progressing and it's developing. So you're slightly more hemmed in now, if you like, with the certain casks in a good way. But yeah, you do. I notice the early days. A lot of these casks, depending on where I put them, as I mentioned earlier, some of them are absolutely amazing. Really are. And you could fill the first fill bourbon cask, even a second fill for that matter. A lot of the older stock was second, and you could obviously access it in that high reaches of the racked warehouse. Lovely temperature gradient, you know, oxidization, hydrolysis, obviously slightly less whiskey in that cask, but it really, you know, it works wonders. Some of the casks are just, you know, just too good to share.
I mean, one of my favourites with your range, especially, is the 25. Obviously, it's at the top end of the range, and I'm pretty sure, and you're probably going to totally prove me wrong here, but that's not peated at all, is it?
No.
So is there, I'm glad you said no, because otherwise I would have looked a right idiot, and I can do that on my own. So is there any thought of doing one lower down the scale that's totally unpeated as a core range?
All right, you mean between an 18 and a 25-year-old, or?
I mean, your 15's obviously got a little bit of peating, hasn't it? They're all slightly peated. But
all right, yes.
Is there any sort of thought of bringing in something in the core range that's unpeated like the 25, but, you know, more accessible?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously, you're always looking at the range. You're always looking to see how it best serves, you know, people like yourselves on, you know, all the guys and everyone out there, you know. So it's something that always, you know, is always, you know, is always needing looked at, and you're always trying to develop it the best you can. Again, you know, you've obviously the stock profiles. When I started, we were only producing 80,000 litres. So I think really, you know, you're really trying to serve everyone's best interest with the stock profile you've got. And it can be tricky. It can be a challenge. You know, obviously to bring something online that was, if it was a wonderful hit, absolutely love this non-peated. I hope you enjoyed it. We've got none left. You know, it's a challenge. You know, it really is a challenge. You know, and it becomes more so every year as obviously the products develop. Especially. So that's why, you know, obviously a lot of the you know, the different, as you mentioned, the different components of the range, you know, are using what they're using. You know, we're potentially looking at peat in there, a small amount. And in fairness, a lot of the peat is quite, you know, it's quite hard to pick up. You know, you really got to think about it, and it should never be, you know, it should never be overbearing or dominating. But yeah, as I say, you've really just got to work with the tools you've got. And you know, the range itself, the core range itself, is quite big for, you know, obviously the stock profile we've got. So it's potentially something for the future. Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, we know you do the festivals, and this year's has obviously been cancelled. You've done a few little things to kind of compensate that. And how is this lockdown affecting you and the distillery itself?
It's obviously at the time it was not ideal for sure. You know, obviously the festival was, you know, it's a big part of our year now. You know, obviously Campbeltown's Malt Festival leading on to the Islay and such like. At the time it was a bit of a disaster, to be honest with you. But I think obviously the work that Gary's done, and Raymond, the photographer, and a lot of other individuals working with the drum team. So there's been a lot of you know, fantastic input, and they've really pulled this together, which has been fantastic. You know, the online virtual festival, it's really went well, and I feel, you know, it's obviously gave everyone the chance to obviously still come to Glen Scotia, albeit from the comfort of your own home. And yeah, it's been, you know, because, you know, I was a wee bit disappointed that I wasn't going to obviously see a lot of the faces I see, and I felt, you know, we're obviously letting people down a little bit, albeit there's a bigger picture to consider for sure. So yeah, it's really been interesting for me. It really has, you know, and the work that everyone's done, as I say, Gary and the team, you know, it's been fantastic. It's made a huge impression, I think, you know, and you know, the Campbeltown Malt Festival and I believe we're doing it again next year. It's been that popular. And then for me personally, obviously, I'm doing a lot more of this. You know, I'm sitting here and speaking to yourself, and it's been positive. You know, it really has. For me, probably I've chatted with more people and got the chance to obviously make a lot more friends than I probably would have at the distillery. Absolutely, I get to meet folk at the distillery, and I spend time with quite a lot of people, but nowhere on this scale. So yeah, I've got to say, now looking at it now, it's all been positive. The only downside really is a small small shot or the small hole in production, you know. So, yeah, but
I mean, obviously, did you? I take it you have shut down. Are you still shut down then, or have you started production again? Or
no, we're shut down. Shut down. Yeah. So,
I mean, how long are you just waiting for instructions to be able to start up again then, or are you kind of already looking at the process of starting up again?
We're obviously, you know, we shut down the end of March, you know, when obviously everything came on as it did, and we're really more or less, you know, following. Well, first and foremost, we're following government guidelines, and obviously Scotland's slightly behind everywhere else, and the same with company policy. So once that is clearer, then we'll know when we can start up. Obviously, the way we work at Glen Scotia, you know, you've got a stillman and a mashman. It should be a lot easier for us to get going again. The only difficult side's obviously going to be the shop and tours and tastings and such like that. That potentially is going to be, slightly more difficult and need a little bit of thought and input. So
yeah. I mean, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to kind of change the way we do it normally. So I'm going to end the recording now, because I am quite conscious that our normal recordings are about 3 hours, and people have mentioned that they're too long. So I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us today. Second time around, first time didn't quite work. And then what I'm going to do is kind of ask everyone to unmute themselves and make it more of a chat informally. So thank you very much for joining us. It's been really good.
Okay.
And hopefully, you know, things will be back to normal and we can come and visit you soon.
Absolutely. My pleasure, son. Thank you.
Cheers. Yeah.